Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move. And I am your host, Nicholas Zart. And today I have a special guest again. We're going back again into the advanced air mobility. Last week we talked to a dear and good friend of mine I've known for a few decades, Kyle Field, who is on the electric vehicle side of things. But today we're going to go back again to electric air mobility. And also with someone I've known for a few years. His name is Marc Ausman, and he is the VP of Sales and Engineering at Electra.aero. So if you've been following advanced air mobility, of course, all you hear about are vertiports and eVTOLs. And eVTOLs are those electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that, theoretically can take off like this, fly horizontally, and land like that. Well, that's very interesting and it's very promising and everything, but many of us in the industry, many of us veterans in the industry, also kind of see a lot of challenges associated with that, on top of the energy to use that, on top of how difficult it will be to fly with these conditions, especially when you have multiple rotors. And another great video you need to check out that we did, a great recording we did with Marilyn Smith, who is a professor at Georgia Tech. We talked about downwash of these aircraft and what it means and everything, a whole new episode you need to watch. Today we're going to concentrate a little bit more on what we call eSTOLs. So what are eSTOLs? eSTOLs are electric short takeoff and landing aircraft. And what it means is that it's a dedicated type of airplane that takes off on a very short runway and lands on an even short runway, if that makes sense. But basically, STOL means short takeoff and landing aircraft. Just as an eVTOL is an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, an eSTOL is an electric short takeoff and landing aircraft. And yes, there are eCTOLs, electric conventional takeoff and landing aircraft, and those are just regular airplanes. So the gist of it is an eVTOL has a lighter payload, meaning it can bring maybe less people, but it can get in and out of tight situations. However, an eCTOL, a conventional airplane, can carry greater payloads, more passengers, but needs a longer runway to take off and land. And then there's that in between, in the middle, and that's the sweet spot that eSTOLs promise to deliver for us all in the advanced air mobility industry. That is to take off on a very short, extra short runway and land on even less. So if you've been following Electra.aero's foray into the industry, they had a prototype called the Goldfinch that took off on about 135 feet and landed on even less than 100 feet. Now their new and commercializable, is that a word? Commercial aircraft is called the EL9, and 9 stands for 9 seats. And that will take off on a little bit longer runway, but also land shorter than its takeoff, and roughly less than 300 feet. That's the kind of runway we're talking about. So just to give you an idea, an eVTOL normally will be able to carry 3 passengers to maybe 4 or 5 passengers. An eSTOL will be able to carry 9 passengers, and of course eCTOLs we're looking at much more, 9 to 90, and when energy density and power density at the battery level shrinks enough, we'll have even bigger eCTOLs. So stay tuned for Marc, whom I've known for a very long time when he started his previous company, also working on an eSTOL. I'll tell you a few points that we're going to be making in this podcast, and I really want you to walk away with, because I will ask you a question at the end of this podcast. These eSTOLs are going to be easier to certify for commercial use than almost all eVTOLs, and the reason is very simple, because an eSTOL, just like an eCTOL, is an airplane. So if you think about it, the FAA or EASA already understands how to certify airplanes. I mean, it's a fuselage with an empennage and wings, right? So it'll be much easier to certify that. But as Marc tells us, there's also another wonderful things that eSTOLs bring to the table directly at the very first generation of these aircraft. These aircraft are IFR, meaning they fly with instruments. So you can be an instrument rated pilot, and you can fly these airplanes, yes, for lack of better words, eSTOLs. Now, what does it mean? It means that operations with eSTOLs are going to be much more extended than they are for eVTOLs, especially the first generation of eVTOLs that are not IFR. They're visual flight only. But these eSTOLs will be able to land in the middle of clouds, just like your regular airplanes do. They will be able to land much later at night. And of course, they have another little trick up their sleeves. They have de-icing, which is extremely important because the first generation of eVTOLs do not have de-icing, meaning that most likely they won't be able to fly at night. They will certainly not be able to fly when there's hail or ice buildup. But eSTOLs can do that, and of course, presumably most eCTOLs will be IFR, meaning using their instruments to fly, to land, to take off, and also have de-icing. So stay tuned because we're going to be introducing a lot of concept, a lot of ideas around that. And again, my question is always the same to you. Your understanding of advanced air mobility now as it is, keep that in mind. Watch this podcast and then tell us in the comments below, how has it evolved? Have we changed your mind? Have we made you think of eSTOLs and eCTOLs as an alternative to advanced air mobility, more likely as a most likely first to fly commercially aircraft within the AM industry? Have you learned anything? Is there anything that you would like us to cover more from now on? And all I say is next we'll have also another good friend of ours who will be talking a little bit about education in advanced air mobility. And next after that, we're going to be talking about railroads. But now, without further ado, let's hear from Marc. So Marc, please introduce yourself. Who is Marc?
Nicholas, good to talk to you some more. And my name is Marc Ausman. I'm the VP of Sales and Support at Electra. We are a new company started in 2020, and our aircraft will revolutionize air travel by bringing it closer to where we live, work, and play. We do this with a 9-passenger hybrid electric aircraft that can operate out of airports, basically the size of a soccer field. And so we're an aircraft manufacturer, and we sell the aircraft to customers who operate the aircraft globally. Today, we have over 2,200 aircraft on order from over 50 different customers. So it's really seeing a lot of traction and a lot of interest. And so it's really exciting being part of this new generation of electric aircraft. My background is really in aviation and in tech. I flew in the Navy, and then I worked in the tech industry and had a chance to get back into aviation through a program called Eclipse Aviation, where we brought to market the world's first very light jet.
Yes.
And that was an exciting program. And you know, in hindsight, that was very traditional technology, trying to do some new and exciting things. But now we're truly at a next sort of generation of aircraft with electric propulsion, giving us the ability to develop aircraft with all kinds of new capabilities that you simply can't do with traditional piston and turbine engines. And so that's what's really exciting about this. And so it's a great opportunity to bring together my background in tech, my background in aviation, and really be able to do this through Eclipse. And then I was on an Airbus program where we built an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And then now working on an electric ultra short aircraft, which is the aircraft that can take off and land in very small spaces. So it's exciting to be a part of this and really be able to expand the benefits of aviation. And we can certainly talk more about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think two things are missing. What company is that you're working with?
It's Electra. Did I?
But no, I'm just laughing because I'm not sure if we said it or not, and I just realized, oops, I think we forgot the most important part of the the whole conversation is the name of the company. So for people who have been sleeping under a rock, there's still some of those out there. What exactly is an eSTOL? I mean, you keep on hearing eVTOL, eSTOL, eCTOLs. What's an eSTOL, Marc?
Yeah, so the first part of what you said earlier is it's Electra.aero. So if you go to Electra.aero on the website, you can see more details about the aircraft. And the E in front of eSTOL, eVTOL is the electric, right? And that's the really kind of new and exciting part of things. And you can take an aircraft, take the turbine engine out, and put an electric motor in, and that really doesn't get you a whole lot. The real win with electric propulsion is that it allows you to design new configurations of aircraft that you simply couldn't do in the past, as I just mentioned. And so eVTOL is electric vertical takeoff and landing. And typically a helicopter has one big set of helicopter blades, and that's what lifts a helicopter. And eVTOL now can take 6, 8, or 12 electric motors and put a blade on each one of those. And now you've got multiple rotors that lift this aircraft up. And then those aircraft can transition to horizontal flight, meaning they can fly like a regular airplane. So they can take off and land like a helicopter, fly like a regular airplane. And that's what we had designed and built when I was at Airbus. And that was really exciting. Um, while there, really had realized that doing this was not as simple as most people thought it was. It's actually quite challenging to do that, in spite of the technology, with electric motors and batteries. And so we believed that an electric short takeoff and landing, or what we're now calling an ultra short aircraft, meaning it can take off in ultra short spaces, right? Ultra small spaces, really mitigates a lot of the risks that you see with vertical lift aircraft. And what this means is we can take off and land in very, very small spaces. Again, that's about the size of a soccer field, which is about 100 yards
Yep.
or 100 meters. And because we can take off and land in these small spaces, it's effectively like operating like a helicopter. And then we can fly like an aircraft because we are a fixed wing aircraft. It is a standard, what's called a Part 23 aircraft. And what that means is the ability to certify that aircraft, the technical risk with developing that aircraft is actually substantially lower than other forms of electric propulsion. And so we think that's a more pragmatic way to bring this to market. And there's a huge market opportunity and a huge benefit for customers by being able to get people, closer to where they want to live, where they live, work, and play. And what that means is you don't have to travel that hour to the large airport, find the parking, go in, go through security, wait in, get on the airplane. It's really, there'll be something very small right next to where you live, and it take you 5 or 10 minutes to get there. You hop on the plane and off you go. And, this is really for regional flights within a few hundred miles, where you might want to go. So it might be small town to small town. It might be feeder into a major airport. So if you live a few hundred miles outside of Chicago, that's a long drive to get in.
Yep.
We can turn that 4-hour drive into a less than a 1-hour flight, and very convenient, very safe. And that's an exciting value proposition.
Yeah, indeed, and so you've touched on so many different topics right here, and I'm going to go directly into the gist of it. You're the first person who actually really made me understand how much these aircraft that have a real fuselage and empennage and wings are so much easier to certify for the FAA. So we have a bit of a running a bet amongst all of us in the
Mhm.
infrastructure side of things that guess who's going to be first to fly. Yeah, sorry guys, it's probably not going to be eVTOLs, most likely going to be eSTOLs. And so we had a lot of great conversation, Mark, around that topic.
Mhm.
Also, another thing that I have to say for my company, you were incremental in making a switch from, focusing on vertiports to focusing on what we call now multi-ports. I love working with airports because within an airport, there's always enough of a runway where we can make you guys take off and land. And you know what? We can put FATOs in the middle of it and have
Mhm.
other aircraft land in there. I mean, after all, the military have done stalled ports for quite a long time, so the technology
Mhm.
exists and everything. So let's talk also about two other things that you mentioned before we get into blown lift technology. Let's talk about some of the other things that are really important for people to understand why your eSTOLs or your ultra short takeoff and landing aircraft are really the way to go. IFR, de-icing, hello. No eVTOLs have that today, right? As far as I can see, as far as I can tell. So tell us why is that important for us? What is that a consideration people should have? And for those people who don't understand, we'll explain what they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, so operating in the national airspace system, both the United States and worldwide, is certainly a big consideration when you develop an airplane. How are you going to operate in that airspace? And the first thing is the infrastructure. And you'd mentioned a multi-port. I love that idea of a multi-port. What that means is you have some set of infrastructure that can handle multiple different types of aircraft. So when you look at aircraft or airports today, traditional airports, there isn't one airport for Boeing's and a different airport for Airbus. And, an airport is designed around a standardized set of infrastructure that allows all kinds of different aircraft from regional jets to Boeing's to Airbuses to military aircraft. Even small general aviation aircraft can go into these large airports. They just normally
Yep.
don't for pragmatic reasons, but they can if they want to because all the infrastructure is standardized and all the navigation equipment and everything is standardized. So that's really great. What we want to see going forward in the future with these electric aircraft, particularly in these small multi-ports that you're referring to, is you know you want something that can handle multiple different types of aircraft. And in the case of a multi-port, we're talking about handling both ultra short aircraft and eVTOL aircraft or electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And what most people
Absolutely.
don't know, and I'll give you a little inside baseball here, is that eVTOLs actually take off and land with a profile that's very, very similar to the ultra short aircraft or a fixed wing aircraft. And let me peel the onion back one more layer. What that means is when an eVTOL takes off, they don't fly up to 1,000 or 2,000 feet vertically and then go on their way. As soon as they lift off, they transition to this forward motion, just like you're doing with your hand there. Yeah, they transition into forward motion and they start moving forward in what's called the transition phase. So they take off vertically, then they have to transition to horizontal flight, which means most of the lift for that aircraft comes from the wing rather than from the vertical lift rotors.
Yeah, and a
Yes,
lot of energy to do that, right? I mean, it
a
takes a lot of
lot.
energy to do
Yes,
that.
a lot of energy. And because the eVTOLs are battery powered, they really don't have a lot of energy in these batteries, right? The batteries are a lot better than they used to be, but they're just barely good enough now for electric aircraft, which is why we're a hybrid, so we can get the range that we need. But we can talk about that more later. In terms
Yep.
of the flight profile, though, around a multiport, they have to take off and then right away they have to move forward. So for some distance, hundreds and hundreds of yards, they're climbing and transitioning in a kind of a forward motion to do this. And a lot of times when you see helicopters take off, they do the same. As soon as
Yes.
they take off, they have to move
Yes.
forward. And that's due to the need to preserve energy for an auto rotation if they need to, which means if they lose an engine, they have to have the energy to be able to land safely. And so you don't take off even vertically in a helicopter. You have to have this forward motion to take off, build the energy, and then you can climb out. And it's if you fly a helicopter, it's called the height velocity curve. And Google it. It's really pretty interesting to learn that little tidbit of information. And
It's true.
so when you look at that flight profile for an eVTOL or even a helicopter, it's very similar to what our aircraft does. The only difference is we need about 150 feet on the ground instead of 50 feet on the ground, and then we take off, we climb out, and then we go on our way just like anybody else does. But the real benefit is we can do it actually quieter, and we can do it 70% lower cost on a per seat mile basis, which means the savings is pretty significant.
N-
So
n-
the yeah,
I was going to say,
go
not
ahead,
only
Nicholas.
that, but with less energy, bigger payload, of course, more people, bigger cargo, and that's also another point that we always make when we
Hmm.
are designing on
Yep.
multi-ports. I really don't want to have to go to the owners of the multi-ports and say, hey, you know what? We had a lot more energy use because we were using aircraft that were using a lot more energy. I want to say, hey, our aircraft are very efficient. We use actually 25% less, hopefully, ideally, but at least 10% less energy than we thought we would use. That's also a really good point to tell your
There,
vertiport operators and, of course, investors behind that.
Yeah, and if you're developing a vertiport, it's a commercial operation, and they have to look at the commercial viability and the profitability of building this new infrastructure. And so, if they can have multiple different types of aircraft operate out of this vertiport, that helps their return on investment, right? So it's more likely that will get built, and that's super important to spur the development of this new infrastructure. Now, I will say that our aircraft is a regular fixed wing aircraft. It can operate out of the
Yes.
thousands and thousands of airports in the US and thousands more around the world today. It doesn't need any change. It doesn't need any new charging infrastructure. It operates with air traffic controllers. It operates with standard pilot certificates. It just fits right into the way things work today. But it also gives operators the ability to expand their route and network infrastructure into these new multiports. And as those more and more get built, so we don't need them to be there to make money and to sell our aircraft today.
Yeah.
but they will help in the future to provide more benefits to the end user and the communities who want to go somewhere. And we've really seen, just a little sidebar here. When you look at what's happened, at least in the United States, 30 years ago, there was a lot of service from typically 19 passenger aircraft into smaller
Yeah.
cities around the United States.
It's
And
true.
what's happened over time is there were some regulatory changes, and there was kind of a shift in the industry to move to from turboprops to smaller jets. And those jets have now, instead of 19 seats, are about 70 seats.
Yep.
And so when you have a 70-seat aircraft, that means you really can't serve the smaller or even mid-sized communities anymore because you can't fill the aircraft. Or if you did have the larger aircraft in those communities, you wouldn't have the frequency of service where it really makes sense to do that. So you need frequency and you need a lift capability. And so by bringing back a 9-passenger aircraft like what we're doing, that means these regional airlines can restore service to the smaller towns that desperately need it and be able to fly into the larger airports, to connect them in with the major hubs and everything. So what's really exciting though is with our aircraft, because of the small footprint needed, we can fly into existing airports, but also places where people, for example, you look in the suburbs of Chicago, there's just massive suburbs, right? And so we
Yeah.
can put a little football field size multi-port somewhere out in the suburbs where actually people live and they don't have to drive all the way out to O'Hare or something, right? Same with Boston. Boston has these
Yep.
massive suburbs to the west, and they don't need to drive all the way into Boston Logan, which is a massive traffic jam, and so it makes flights a lot more convenient. And if you're in a small town, that makes sense too. And uh, when we're talking about infrastructure and how this new aircraft can support that, what's really exciting is you know, small airports typically aren't congested, but a lot of the larger airports are congested, especially during popular times of the day. It's really hard for the airliners to get it, and so you might say, well, how do you get a small 9-seat in there? You don't want to take a slot away from, a larger commercial aircraft, um, because this aircraft that we're developing, and can operate like a helicopter. We can actually come in on alternate routes than what
Yes.
the normal air traffic would traditionally allow. And today, helicopters have special routes made through special arrangements with airports where they can come in kind of from the side or up the middle or kind of different ways outside of normal traffic. So in both good weather and bad weather, we can come into these airports kind of outside the normal flow of traffic, which means we don't add to the congestion of these airports and we don't get stuck in these big long lines of airliners trying to get in and out either. So there's benefit in getting into the smaller communities through a reduction in noise, which we really haven't talked about, but reduction in noise is a big one, and getting into the shorter runways, and really bringing electric propulsion into these communities. And depending on what part of the country you live, there's some communities that are very sensitive to uh, you know, um, traditional aircraft versus electric propulsion type aircraft and things. And so there's all kinds of benefits for us getting into the smaller communities. But more importantly, is that I think the flying public generally kind of lost faith in these really small aircraft of the past. They're noisy and they're not comfortable and they're just not good aircraft to fly in. The electric propulsion type aircraft really solve a lot of those challenges. And so it's a
Oh, yeah.
refreshing way to give customers, customers being people who fly on the aircraft, a new aircraft to get in that they're really going to enjoy flying. And then the operator can
Uh,
get in and out of these communities in a very community friendly way. In some cases, flying in and out of the suburbs where they never could do that before. And then as they're
yep.
flying into the large airports, we can integrate with those large airports in a way that doesn't really interfere and add to the congestion that's there today. So it's a great value proposition all the way around for
It,
everybody. And so we're really excited about bringing air service back to a lot of these small communities that don't have it today.
Yeah, and I can't. I'm going to give you a very simple case scenario. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, right now, and I often go to Augusta, right? So it's a small regional airport. It's actually an international airport, but it's a regional airport. Augusta is another regional airport. If I want to fly there, now I have to drive because there are no highways, so it's about two hours and 20 minutes. If I want to fly there, I will take a fully packed 757, fully packed 757 that will be in the air 25 minutes, barely
Yeah.
hit 18,000 feet, go to Atlanta, then take another little, like
Yep.
a, an MD-80 or something like that. And I'm thinking, wow, my carbon footprint all of a sudden is just ballooned out of control. It's very noisy. I have to wait until 6 o'clock in the morning. So every time I drive my car for 2 hours and 2.5 hours, I'm thinking, God, I wish I had an EL9 that would just whisk me across directly in about, what, 20 minutes or something like that. So another thing that I also love about your aircraft is the blown wing effect. I mean, you guys are doing a heck of a lot of things with it. Can you explain people, and this also explains why your takeoff angle is probably so
Mhm.
steep. Explain to us, how does that work? How does that differ from a regular airplane?
So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So the key technology to being able to take off and land in such a short short amount of space with 9 passengers and one or two pilots is really due to the electric motors. And like I said earlier, electric motors allow you to build new configurations of aircraft, new types of aircraft. And in our specific case, if you go to our website that I mentioned earlier, you'll see that the aircraft has 8 small propellers along
Yep.
the front of the wings. And so that blows air over the wings, and that's where the term blown lift comes from. So the lift comes from blowing all that air across the entire span of the wing, and that makes the wing aerodynamically much larger than it is physically. And what we've learned is that we get about 4 times the amount of lift from that wing than you would get if it's unblown. And so otherwise, we'd have to have a wing that's 4 times the size. Well, if you have a wing
Yeah.
that's 4 times the size,
Uh,
you start running into problems with physics where you have more structure, more weight, more drag. The aircraft performance goes down substantially, and pretty soon you have a plane that doesn't make sense for anybody. So the blown lift enabled by electric propulsion allows us to build a plane that can take off and land in these small spaces. And this couldn't have been done even 3 or 4 years
See,
ago
yeah.
commercially, because if you put a piston engine or a turbine engine on the wing, you'd have 8 of these pistons or turbines, and it'd be
Mm.
so noisy and so fuel efficient. And typically, like turbine engines, for example, don't scale down very well. They actually
Yep.
get better and more efficient as they get larger and larger. And that's kind of what you've
Yep.
seen with the Boeing 737. If you go and look at the original 737 that came out, it had these small kind of cigar looking like engines.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And,
And a
and
lot of
now we have
dark
these,
suit, a
yeah,
lot
and
of
now we've
emissions behind.
yeah, and they're getting better for sure with those engines, more
Oh
efficient
yeah,
and
they are.
cleaner.
They are. They
But
are.
they're also getting the diameter of the engines is much bigger because the it's called the high bypass engine, meaning there's more air that it blows kind of around the engine, and so the diameter is much bigger. And so that was actually the basis of the whole Boeing 737 Max problem was they had to move
Yep.
the engines around to make them fit because the plane was never really originally designed for that. But the point is
Oh, whoa.
that
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a
the
very
point
low
is
plane.
that yeah, the bigger those turbines are, the more efficient they are, and that's kind of
Yeah.
the natural progression.
Yeah.
So electric motors really enabled us to do this blown lift configuration, and it's not new. It's been out mostly on an experimental basis in the past,
Yep.
NASA and those kinds of projects. There's been some attempts at blown lift in the past, but with older pistons or turbines, you ended up with a lot of linkages, or you ended up with a lot of
Yes.
extra complexity to the aircraft where it didn't really make sense. Electric motors are really nice because they're super simple. There's just 2 bearings, and a shaft. That's all that moves. There's no
Yep.
high temperature components and all that. And so you can, and they scale linearly for power versus weight. So they can scale up, scale down. You have a very
Yep.
efficient motor, kind of whatever size you need it to be. So they're really great for that. And I would say that's really the big enabling technology that's made this possible. And so I think there was a lot of hype, 5, 6, 7 years ago around electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. But a few
Yep.
of us had, I think, the foresight to see that there was a lot of complexity there. And I don't want to knock them. I think they're great. I think there's a
No.
place in this world for them. But I think the vast majority of flights and regional flights are going to be with an aircraft like ours, where you have two things really. One is the blown lift, which allows you to get in and out of small fields, which means you can get the airplane closer to where people live and where they want to go. And that really ends up saving you time. And that when you save time, that increases the value of that flight. And really, getting you away from major airports, which are really good for like longer flights. And then, so that's one component is the blown lift, and the second component is really the hybrid electric. Uh,
Yes.
a lot of the eVTOLs, I think almost all the eVTOLs are really pure battery electric, which means they are more like a Tesla, where they're pure battery electric. And what we're doing is more like a Prius, which is a hybrid. So there's an engine that can burn sustainable aviation fuel or any kind of fuel that's commonly available at airports. Typically jet fuel. We don't burn 100 low lead. That's kind of on its way out.
Yeah, it's on its
And
way out.
so the hybrid, think of it like a Prius, and the hybrid gets us the range and gets our customers the range, the ability to fly these regional flights. So battery electric airplane, might get you 50 miles, and a more hybrid electric type aircraft would get you in the hundreds of miles. And that's a big, big difference. And then to go back to your original question, what you asked about commercial operations and de-ice and those kinds of things, um, the it's really important that a commercial aircraft, meaning one that's going to be used, to reliably provide transportation services to the paying customer, needs to be able to operate in almost all weather conditions.
Yes.
And in good weather and bad weather, not super bad weather, but generally bad weather. So you can fly in rainstorms and when there's clouds and things. But there's limits, of course, to that. But you got to be able to fly in bad weather. You got to be able to fly night and day, and you really got to be able to fly in the system that exists today, because the aviation system, does not change rapidly, and that's kind of baked into the design of things. In that everything is very deliberate and very carefully thought through, and always focused on safety first. And so they don't sort of casually just
Yes.
change things and hope it works out. You really have to be deliberate about it. And so the smart move is to operate within the way things work today. And the way things work today is with fixed wing aircraft to operate in all weather conditions. I think when you see these electric vertical lift aircraft, one of the kind of challenges that people don't realize right now is that you could book one of those, but you're going to want to go to the airport early just to allow time for if it gets canceled last minute due to weather. So if the weather comes
Yes.
in and it can't fly, you still have to allow time to drive instead of take that flight. Whereas with our aircraft, we can take off and land in almost all weather conditions and operate there, and so we can provide that reliable service that customers have come to expect from the airlines today. And
Yeah.
that's really, really kind of a key component of being able to operate these aircraft. So we want to bring this new technology to market and do it in a way that really makes sense to fit in with the way things work today and to
Yeah.
provide reliable service.
Yeah, yeah, and you make a very good point about reliability. That's something that we all need to take into consideration because we want something that can fly most of the time anywhere. A lot of these, I mean, actually, all eVTOLs, as far as I can see, are not instrument rated, so it's all visual, and that means that if there are clouds, there are clouds. You cannot fly, but your aircraft is IFR, so it is instrument rated, and of course, and the de-icing part was, we run into icy condition.
Yeah,
eVTOLs will not be able to fly, but yours will. So it makes a
correct.
lot of sense, especially when you look at it, in a sort of a multi-port, because we want, regular airplanes to fly.
Yeah,
We want helicopters to fly. Come on, the more the merrier, of course.
yeah.
So I have to have you back on this show because there's so many other questions. When I look at the propellers, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I gotta ask Mark, why are those propellers different and the way they're set up and everything? But that's for another time. I'd like to ask now the more personal questions like what gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you do this? Why don't you just go get a job somewhere in a bank and then that's it? Get your mortgages and continue your life. What motivates you?
Well, I'm really, aviation's been a big part of my life, and my family, my mother, my father, my uncle have all been involved with aviation very deeply, and I've sort of picked up that bug. And I can't say any of my kids have, but but I
Yeah.
certainly have, and it's very exciting for me to have it be a daily part of my life. Um, I think the kind of the big picture part of it is I'm just excited to be able to grow the benefits of aviation, and what we're doing is we're going to be providing air service to a much broader range of people around the world and make it more likely to fly than to drive. And if you look at any statistic, you'll see that flying is safer than driving. If you're going to drive that same leg to a major airport, you're actually much safer to fly it than to drive it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's just more convenient and the whole thing. And so I think we finally unlocked that part of the of I guess the technology and everything coming together to where we can now truly kind of bring back service to a lot of these small communities and open up the ability to what we call direct aviation, getting people closer to where they live, work, and play, which makes it more convenient, which means it's just a better offering for everybody. And that's what we're excited about. That's what I'm excited about personally, is technologies and programs and aircraft and the people. Great group of people working in
Oh,
this industry and working at
yes.
Electra. It's just
Yes.
really exciting to be a part of this. And so I'm honored to be able to do that.
Yeah, I know. I'm so bummed. I missed the unveil a few months ago. I had a conflict of schedule, but I was, and I'm not too far away either. So it was really annoying. But yeah, I definitely look forward to having you again because there's so many more things that we need to talk about. And also, I think people really need to understand that these ultra short takeoff we're going to call them eSTOLs. I think it's easier for most people to remember, but it's they have a place in our AAM industry. They have actually a very important place, and I think a lot of the focus is maybe a little bit too much on eVTOLs. They're great, they're wonderful, and they have their place. Every tool for every situation, no doubt
Agreed.
about that.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
we need to talk a lot more about eSTOLs, and also we need to talk about who else is out there because so far I think you guys are the only one. So maybe one very quick question before we wrap it up is: do you have anything you would like to share with our listeners or viewers? Something that they would have to walk away with having listened to all of this, having watched all of this.
Well, I would just say keep an eye on what's happening with the electric aircraft industry, and you'll see how hopefully you'll be able to benefit from that. And then within the next, I would say, 5 years, as these aircraft come into service, and they will be operated in ways that traditional aircraft have not. Of course, you can go to your local airport, but there'll be other opportunities that open up. So I would say keep an eye out for new ways, and I would invite you to keep aviation at the top of mind when you're thinking about these. Sort of driving 200 or 300 miles. Think
Mm.
about flying, and the opportunity to do that will be growing in the next, years to come. So we're
Oh,
excited to be able to do that, and I would invite people to think more about aviation as a way to do these shorter flights, um, going
yeah,
forward. So, Nicholas,
yeah.
thank you
We're
very much. It's been exciting to
it's
to talk to you today.
Oh, likewise. I'm really excited because we are going back to the original promise of aviation, which was really, barn
Hmm.
hopping, right? I mean, we were supposed to go from small airport to small airport. We build all these small airports everywhere. I shouldn't say small, regional airports is a much better word for them. But we've also removed all of that, the bigger 737, the bigger A320, A321s now. We've sort of
Hmm.
I miss those days, taking an ATR and just going from one island to another. Those were
Hmm.
wonderful days. So you guys are bringing this back in a quieter,
Hmm.
more efficient, less energy hungry way,
Yep.
cleaner, and of course much more affordable, at least on the operator side. So that will be really interesting. So Mark, again, thank you very much for coming here. I can't tell you how important you've been in my side of the business too, because you really helped us tweak our ways very differently than other AAM infrastructure companies out there. And I hope to see you again very soon. And and for those of you still watching or listening to us, please like, share, subscribe, and let us know. Did your image or idea of AAM change after listening to Mark? Did you have any kind of preconceived notions? What do you think now? And what do you look forward to in the future? In the meantime, we'll see you very soon again. Thank you.